the things I see in this country of ours make my blood boil. I see people with foreign money. I see Negroes holding jobs that belong to me and you. Now I ask you, if we allow this thing to go on, what's going to become of us real Americans?
I've heard this kind of talk before, but I never expected to hear it in America.
This fellow seems to know what he's talking about.
What are we real Americans going to do about it? You'll find it right here in this little pamphlet. The truth about Negroes and foreigners. The truth about the Catholic Church.
Do you believe in that kind of talk?
That all makes pretty good sense to me.
And I tell you, friends, we'll never be able to call this country our own until it's a country without. Without what? Yeah, without what? Without Negroes. Without alien foreigners. Without Catholics. Without Freemasons. You know these things.
What's wrong with the Masons? I'm a Mason. Hey, that fellow's talking about me.
And that makes a difference, doesn't it?
These are your enemies. These are the people who are trying to take over our country. Now you know them. You know what they stand for. And it's up to you and me to fight them. Fight them and destroy them before they destroy us. Thank you.
Before he said Masons, you were ready to agree with him.
Well, yes, but he was talking about... What about those other people?
But in this country, we have no other people. We are American people, us.
What about you? You aren't American, are you?
I was born in Hungary, but now I am an American citizen. And I have seen what this kind of talk can do. I saw it in Berlin.
What were you doing there?
I was a professor at the university. I heard the same words we have heard today. But I was a fool then. I thought Nazis were crazy people, stupid fanatics. But unfortunately, it was not so. You see, they knew that they were not strong enough to conquer a unified country. So they split Germany into small groups. They used prejudice as a practical weapon to cripple the nation. Of course, that was not easy to do. They had to work hard to do it. You see, we human beings are not born with prejudices. Always they are made for us, made by someone who wants something. Remember that when you hear this kind of talk. Somebody is going to get something out of it, and it isn't going to be you. This is not classroom theory. I saw it happen. We must never let that happen to us or to our country. We must never let ourselves be divided by race or color or religion, because in this country we all belong to minority groups. I was born in Hungary. You are a Mason. These are minorities. And then you belong to other minority groups too. You are a farmer. You have blue eyes. You go to the Methodist Church. Your right to belong to these minorities is a precious thing. You have a right to be what you are and say what you think, because here we have personal freedom. We have liberty. And these are not just fancy words. This is a practical and priceless way of living. But we must work at it. We must guard everyone's liberty, or we can lose our own. If we allow any minority to lose its freedom by persecution or by prejudice, we are threatening our own freedom. And this is not simply an idea. This is good, hard common sense. You see, here in America is not a question whether we tolerate minorities. America is minorities. And that means you and me.
Hello and welcome to Overtime. The last 2 days in particular have been rather interesting, and we've seen once again this multi-pronged assault of chaos going into effect. The last time we reported on anything Trump had done, it was the firing of 300 people who worked at the Department of Energy, and it appears that Trump was unaware, as was his Elon Musk and his Doge compatriots, that atomic power and atomic weapons fall under the Department of Energy. So the 300 workers all worked on maintaining nuclear warheads, which strikes me as being reasonably important. Upon learning the fact that they had fired these workers, who are absolutely essential, DOGE went about trying to rehire them. I'm not sure what the status of that is. However, they have done it again, and with the FDA, fired a number of workers, including those working on avian flu. One of the reasons egg prices is so high is because of the avian flu issue. When one bird has avian flu, they usually slaughter all of them because they're kept so close to each other. If one's got it, they all have it. So if they've got a single positive test, this has led to the culling of a huge amount of chickens. And in the study of the avian flu and how to either slow down the progress or combat it, it falls under, about to say the DEA. That's another agency. Falls under, and I just gave the agency and I have forgotten it, but FDA, I believe it. Yeah. So, once again, what we're seeing is what you can expect when the idea of efficiency, which I'm all for, and I think you can dramatically improve efficiency in the United States and in government agencies. Oh my God, are they inefficient? I think there are many ways to improve it. You do it by cutting back on things that aren't needed. You don't do it by slashing everything, including essential services, including scientific studies that have very important time restraints on them. You don't do it by just stopping Social Security checks and then deciding, well, are we going to re-add this program or not? That is the more gratifying way to do it, but that's not the best way to do it when you're running a country. If Elon Musk wants to do that with Twitter, that's fine. I remember when Ross Perot was running for president, a great many people were saying, well, he was a very successful businessman, and the U.S. is a business, so a businessman would obviously make a great president. It is true that the U.S. is a business, but it's far more than just a business, and if it were a business, it would be closer to a nonprofit than anything else. The objective of the U.S. ultimately shouldn't be to make money. It should be the health and welfare of all of its citizens. I'm not sure that a businessman is the person you want to put in charge of that. At any rate, a federal judge yesterday declined to stop Elon Musk and the White House's Department of Government Efficiency from accessing data at the agencies that they have essentially seized. This includes Treasury and what is it? I'm always forgetting the name. The essentially their HR agency. So records of 2 million federal workers, records of all of the payments going in and out of the United States. 14 states sued to challenge Musk's access to this data, but in a 10-page decision, the judge found that the states failed to show that they will suffer imminent irreparable harm unless Doge is stopped. Quote, the court is aware that Doge's unpredictable actions have resulted in considerable uncertainty and confusion for the plaintiffs and for many of their agencies and residents. But the, quote, possibility that the defendants may take actions that irreparably harm the plaintiffs is not enough. This judge has therefore basically said that, again, Musk, who has not been elected, he's finally gotten an official position, I think, from Trump, and may by now have a federal ID, but certainly didn't have it when he started accessing this information. A private citizen has access to untold amounts of information. The idea that there are plenty of situations where you don't have to prove a specific harm will happen in order to stop. We don't know what harm precisely would happen if we released nuclear secrets out into the wild, but we know it's not a very good idea. At any rate, that was the finding of the judge yesterday. In addition, yesterday, Trump took rather extraordinary measures to consolidate his power even further. In his executive order, let's see, I don't have the number here, but it is called the Restoring Democracy and Accountability in Government Executive Order. Today, President Donald J. Trump signed an executive order ensuring that all federal agencies are accountable to the American people as required by the Constitution. Under this executive order, Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution, which vests all executive power in the president, meaning all executive branches and official employees are subject to his supervision. Therefore, because all executive power is vested in the president, all agencies must, 1, submit draft regulation to the White House for review, with no carve-out for so-called independent agencies, except where monetary policy functions of the Federal Reserve, and 2, consult the White House on their priorities and strategic plans, and the White House will set their performance standards. Now, what this is saying is that agencies which have previously had a very good deal of autonomy now have to report directly to the President of the United States. And I think he also, and to the Attorney General, I believe, was added, making it so that the President sets the agenda. Now, presumably, this is handing power back to the people. The problem is, we have checks and balances for a reason. No one person represents the people. Donald Trump does not represent the people. He represents, ostensibly, well, let me rephrase that. He is 1/3 of the representation of the people. He represents everybody, including those who didn't vote for him. Unfortunately, he represents me. I'm not delighted by that fact, but nonetheless. But he is still only 1/3 of my representation. I'm also represented by the Supreme Court of the United States and by Congress that created these agencies. He is not permitted to simply usurp power in the name of taking the representation I already have from one branch of government and adding it to his because he somehow represents the people. No, I have congressmen I elected. He has some representation of the people, but he does not represent the people unless he is king. And we'll get to that in a minute. Reining in independent agencies, so-called independent agencies like the Federal Trade Commission, the Federal Communications Commission, and the Securities and Exchange Commission have exercised enormous power over the American people without presidential oversight. He's not entirely wrong here. These agencies, unfortunately, in many cases have the power to arrest and or try and convict people. And in many of these sessions, you're actually, because you're being tried not by an actual judge, but by the committee, you can be guilty until proven innocent. So there is a number of difficulties with, say, the Federal Trade Commission. If you get into trouble with the Federal Trade Commission, because of their independence, it can be very difficult to undo that. Having said that, there are ways to change that without saying that it all belongs to the President of the United States. They spend tax dollars and set priorities without consulting with the President. I've got to tell you, the President's also already one of the hardest jobs on the planet, being President of the United States. Now he's going to oversee every single federal agency personally. That was always thought to be too unwieldy. That was one of the reasons they had independence. It wasn't the primary reason, but it was one of them. They will no longer impose rules on the American people without oversight or accountability. The oversight and accountability was reasonably limited, but Congress had its own means of dealing with that. And one of the reasons that they would impose these rules is, again, they are experts. The CDC knows far more about the transmissibility of COVID and other diseases than Donald J. Trump, who thinks that you can cure COVID maybe by injecting bleach. That's what he said. He said at least we should look into it. He wasn't advocating for it. He was advocating for looking into, should we be injecting bleach because that might work. Or, putting up like a light, one of those disinfectant UV lights down our throats and seeing if it cleans us out from the inside. These were proposals that he had. Now, I'm not a scientist, and I know that those are ludicrous. I can only imagine what somebody who spent 7 years getting a PhD would think of these ideas. They know better. I don't like that they know better. I don't like that there are people smarter than me who can say, just do as you're told. Unfortunately, that's part of being a human being. I don't know everything. So sometimes I have to listen to my mechanic. Sometimes I get ripped off, and sometimes I don't. That's part of life. And by the way, sometimes the CDC calls it wrong, and sometimes they don't. Every person at the CDC has forgotten more about science than I will ever know. I have as much objection as anyone else to putting my life in the hands of complete strangers. But we're a single country, and we're a very large country. A lot of strangers have nuclear codes that could determine life or death for everybody on this planet. That doesn't make me sleep particularly well either, especially when we're in a country in such peril. Maybe it's better to try to find ways to work together than just getting rid of everybody. The executive power without responsibility has no place in our republic. Executive power without responsibility has no place in our republic. This is I am reading from the White House executive order. Has anyone told Trump this? Obviously, he's referring to the agencies, not himself. The United States was founded on the principle that government should be accountable to the people. That's why the founders created a single president who alone is vested with the executive power. Yeah, but they also created a Congress that's accountable to the people, and unfortunately, a Supreme Court that's accountable to absolutely nobody. The responsibility to, quote, take care that the laws be faithfully executed. Well, any day he'd like to start doing that, I am a fan of that idea. So he has my full support the day he'd like to start doing that. Voters and the president can now hold federal agencies, not just cabinet departments, responsible for all of the decisions and the constitutional that the Constitution demands. All right. This is unprecedented. He is basically saying that absolutely every agency created by Congress falls exclusively under the executive branch, and he has the right to dictate what course they go in, what projects they pursue, and ostensibly this would be the budget, meaning he can shut down any agencies he doesn't like. Again, this has been before the Supreme Court multiple times. The Supreme Court has shot it down because they have said, for the same reason that they shot down a line item veto, but they have said we're not going to do it because this is essentially a line item veto. If Congress creates a new agency and you don't like specific projects in the agency, you can just say, oh, well, I can't stop the project, but I can completely defund it. And the same thing. So, it's been made crystal clear by this Congress, by previous Supreme Courts that he is not permitted to do this. He has said before he's not going to allow the law or judges to stop him. I mean, he's literally said that, so I don't know what else we can do about it. As I said before, let's see, the U.S. Department of Agriculture. The U.S. Department of Agriculture fired a number of employees that were heading up the federal government's response to H5N1 avian flu. They are now trying to contact those employees and get them back. As with the nuclear engineers at the Department of Energy, some appear to be giving some pushback on coming back. They don't like the instability of their jobs. We don't know yet what's going on with that. A couple of other interesting things that have happened, and then we'll try to wrap this up for you. I don't want this to go on too long. Earlier today, Donald Trump tweeted, let's see. Let me see if I can find it for you here. Oh, no, we'll get to that. Let's see. Do I have? Oh, that's why. Please pardon me a second while I get to there. Here we go. So this was a tweet. Congestion pricing is dead in Manhattan, and all of New York is saved. Long live the king. I have friends from England who talk about the monarchy, and I was just like, yeah, the U.S. really is not a big fan of monarchies, and we're not. It's ingrained in us for the last 200 years. Even joking about being king is extraordinary. Wow. So what does he talk about? Congestion pricing. Well, New York was charging $9 for people to enter Manhattan at the height of traffic over the bridges. Why were they doing this, and are they allowed to do this, considering that it was actually federal roadways? Well, there's an exemption in federal roadways where you can charge taxes at the state level if it is for projects that are being done by the state's infrastructure program for roads and yada, yada, yada. So New York issued a tax that was to serve dual purposes. It was creating, I think it was $14 billion a year to help with infrastructure needs, specifically pertaining to roads and fire hydrants, stuff like that. But also was acting to curb some of the congestion coming into Manhattan. This is because the price was so high, you'd really have to want to come in order to do it. By doing this, he is going to dramatically increase the congestion going into New York. It's now going to be presumably free, but because it's free, everybody's going to do this instead of taking the subway or some other means of getting in, and it's going to be bumper-to-bumper traffic. So the idea that he has saved Manhattan from this $9 fee, and don't get me wrong, I'm not necessarily a fan of solving problems this way, but right now a federal court has looked at it and has stayed Trump's order that the congestion pricing ends. So as of this moment, it's still occurring. But having said that, once again, this is going to go into the courts. What concerns me most is this long live the king. Why? It was followed up from the White House. I think that was this has got to be Twitter, where they tweeted out "Long live the king" along with this photo. Trump, long live the king, and he's got a crown. Now, many people think that this is just trolling. Well, I've got to tell you, and we had this discussion. I think it was last night when we had on Merck and Dylan Burns. And we're going to have this discussion tomorrow night for downtime, because I think we're going to be talking a lot about how it was. People always say, well, we wouldn't let Hitler come around in our country. We'd see him coming and all of this other stuff. Hitler tried to overthrow the government once and failed. He then became chancellor and started consolidating power and succeeded his second time around. He wrote Mein Kampf from prison for trying to overthrow the government. And in it, he suggested that racial purity was one of the most important things, and that he was going to find a way to eliminate the Jews. And they were going to try to remove them to other countries. And if that didn't work, they might have to take more extreme measures. He was crystal clear from the beginning. And I think people thought, well, nobody would ever really do that. And they didn't have the word trolling back then, but I'm sure plenty of people said, he's just saying that to get votes, or he's just saying that to get people's attention, because that's what works. And he had some good ideas. Had this. Okay. Trump's not completely bereft of good ideas. In my opinion, he usually stumbles across them by accident, but nonetheless, he's had a few. But this is something you can't joke about, and you have to. It's kind of like saying the word bomb on an airplane. It's a little stupid that if you say bomb on an airplane, all of a sudden everybody's going to, go. Do we really have to take it that seriously? Yeah. Because of the potential consequences, we have to take it that seriously, and we don't joke around. When somebody with this much power decides that he's king, decides to have that drawn up and printed out, my advice, take him at his word. Take him at his word. He's already said what he wants to do. And he's already said that you vote for him, you won't ever have to vote again. He said that. You think this is here you go, let's put this up here, and we can get the whole thing. You think that's a joke? Maybe, but I've noticed a lot of his jokes end with him being in complete charge of absolutely everything. No, I think you need to take him at his word, and it's pretty astonishing that he had the goal to print that, I think, and I'm aware that his supporters are sitting there saying, well, it's just a small thing, it's just a... Yeah, when you're inside the system, when you're institutionalized into whatever system it is that he's got, everything makes this weird kind of sense. And everything is just one incremental step, which is, again, exactly what happened. Hitler didn't just wake up one day and say, round up all the Jews and throw them into the ghetto. No, he started taking their rights one by one by one over time. He would never have succeeded if he just went ahead just from A to Z, skipping all the other letters in between. Trump is consolidating power. Period. End of discussion. You can't read any of his executive orders and not come to that conclusion. At this point, it is not, the burden is not on me to prove that he is trying to create an authoritarian state with him at the top. The burden is for everybody else to prove why he's not. Because the evidence is crystal clear, and if he keeps going at this rate, and he's saying as much. Oh, it's a joke? Fine, prove it's a joke, because it's not that funny to me. I don't see the humor. Two more quick things. In, I believe it was Philadelphia. Yeah, now, we have not been able to confirm this, but it's worth covering. This was yesterday, I believe. In Philadelphia, a ICE vehicle was firebombed. As far as this is hugely significant. I think this is something that everybody needs to think about. The reason is we've seen plenty of cars on fire. We've covered plenty of riots. This wasn't a riot. This wasn't the middle of the night. This was an attack against a federal vehicle, at least purportedly. We haven't confirmed this, so I do want to be a little careful here until we've got that. But that appears to be my understanding, is that it was a nice vehicle. If that's the case, what you have is a targeted attack against a federal vehicle, not an accident, not an act of rage of protesters flipping the vehicle over because their soccer team lost. It's not that. This is something completely different. Many more of these happen, and Trump gets to say, well, we are under attack. There are revolutionaries. And then he gets to declare martial law, and this is what he wants. This is the beginning. That's the step we're at now, the stage where people are taking matters into their own hands and acting, which is what Trump wants, strangely enough, because it empowers him to respond. So we figured it was worth mentioning that this is the first of that behavior, and I highly doubt that it's going to be the end of that. So we wanted to make note of that. And then one other tangentially story, but before that, I do want to remind everyone, come join us on the Discord. We are going to have downtime tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Eastern. Lance and I, we had a very nice post-show conversation yesterday on voting patterns in Germany and what it really took, for Hitler to become democratically elected, as he in fact was, after committing an act of insurrection. The parallels are just... Anyways, we're going to have that discussion, I think, tomorrow night. So I hope you guys will join us tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Eastern, for downtime, and again on the Discord. So, what was the last story? An 11-year-old girl in Texas took her own life when her classmates were taunting her that Immigration and Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE, was going to come take her parents, and she was going to be left all alone. Apparently, there was a very large level of abuse. It spiraled, and despite reports to the school on numerous occasions, no action was taken. She attempted suicide, was not immediately successful, lingered in the hospital for about 5 days, and died. Believe it or not, this is not a story about Donald Trump or ICE or anything like that. What they're doing is horrible, and it's scaring the living daylights, and it is destroying families. Trump had very little to do with this girl's death. ICE also had very little to do with this girl's death, though they're not 100% off the hook. They didn't. What it was our tendency to mock, belittle, attack people who are different. And we can do that even at an early age. And the school's paralysis and its ability to step in and do anything. And by the way, I don't think any of Trump's policies are going to help schools deal with this problem, which creates an environment for skyrocketing rates of child suicide. Trans issues are not that different from it. When people have gender dysphoria and have no way to deal with it, sometimes they feel like that's their way out. That's why trans teens have such a higher suicide rate, that and the obvious bullying and all of these other things. So tonight, I guess the last word that I wanted to say is the people you meet around you. You don't know what kind of day they're having. You don't know what burdens they're under. You don't know what their life has been like, even as an 11-year-old who thought that her whole family was going to be taken away from her and she was going to be left all alone. Be good to other people. It doesn't cost you anything. And if everybody does it, it comes back to everybody else in spades. Always better to be good, if you possibly can. See you all tomorrow night for Downtime, 8 p.m. Eastern. Thank you.